Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty intense. It's from a book called Political Ponerology by Andrew M. Lobaczewski. And his big idea? That evil isn't just something a person does, it's something that can literally infect an entire political system, almost like a disease. So let's just jump right in with a huge question, one that people have been wrestling with forever. Why is it that perfectly healthy, stable societies can just get sick? They suddenly spiral into chaos, tyranny, and destruction. What is actually going on there? Now, our first instinct is to blame politics or economics when things fall apart, right? But Lobaczewski had this really different take. He said, what if we stopped thinking like political scientists and started thinking like doctors? What if we're not looking at a political failure, but at an actual sickness in the society itself? See, he argued that all our usual tools, looking at history through the lens of economics or ideology, they just don't cut it. They're good at describing the symptoms, like a cough or a fever, but they completely miss the underlying disease, the actual pathogen causing the problem. And this is where it gets really chilling. Lobaczewski points out this wild paradox. Our deep desire for peace and safety can actually be the very thing that opens the door to oppression. Think about it. When there's a huge crisis, people get scared. They get desperate for stability. And in that desperation, they're willing to accept almost anything, which is the perfect opening for people who want nothing more than total control. Okay, so if we're running with this idea that a society can get sick, the next logical question is, how do you diagnose it? And that's exactly what Lobaczewski tried to do. He proposed a whole new science, a new lens for looking at this age-old problem. He gave it a name, Ponerology. It comes from a Greek word for evil, and it's basically the science of evil. His argument was pretty straightforward. If we ever want to treat this sickness, we have to stop talking about evil like it's some mystical, philosophical thing. We have to start studying it like a real, observable, psychological phenomenon. And this old Latin proverb he quoted just nails it, doesn't it? There is no cure for an unknown disease. It's so simple but so profound. You wouldn't want your doctor just guessing what's wrong with you. They need a diagnosis. And in the same way, a society has to understand what's actually making it sick before it has any hope of getting better. So what are these pathogens that Ponerology is looking for? Well, they're specific psychological traits. We're talking about things that can be clinically identified, like psychopathy and extreme narcissism. The idea is that individuals with these disorders are magnetically drawn to power. And here's the kicker. They think and operate in a way that is just fundamentally different from how most of us, with our normal sense of empathy, see the world. Right. So you might be wondering, how does this jump from just a few individuals to taking over an entire system of government? Well, Lobaczewski lays out a very specific and honestly pretty terrifying roadmap for how this disease takes hold. He calls it the hysteroidal cycle. It all begins, ironically, in good times. Society is prosperous, people get comfortable, a little complacent maybe, critical thinking starts to slip, and then, bam, a crisis hits. It could be a war, a financial crash, whatever. The society's plunged into this state of heightened, irrational fear, mass hysteria. And in that moment of collective panic, its psychological immune system just collapses. It's completely vulnerable. And that vulnerability is the opening. If it's exploited, it can lead to what he calls a pathocracy. And this is a really key point. A pathocracy isn't about left-wing or right-wing politics. It's a completely different category. It's a system of government where a small, psychologically abnormal minority has taken control of everyone else. Now, he's clear that this isn't some inevitable destiny. It really takes a perfect storm. The hysteria, that's the fertile soil. But the disease, the pathocracy, only truly takes root if those pathological individuals are positioned to grab power right when society is at its weakest. Okay, so what's it actually like to live in a system like that? For the average person, the healthy majority, what is the day-to-day reality of living under a pathocracy? Well, Lobaczewski describes it as a state of constant psychological whiplash. It's deeply confusing and stressful because the logic of the people in charge is completely alien. Their actions don't line up with their words. What you see as cruelty, they call strength. And truth? Well, truth is just whatever they say it is today. He had this brilliant analogy for it. He said it's like color blindness. See, a normal person sees the world in a full spectrum of moral and emotional color. Things like empathy, compassion, guilt. But a pathocrat is blind to all of that. Their world is black and white. It's all about power, control, and getting what they want. And they use our inability to even imagine their worldview against us. We can't understand them, and they exploit that confusion.
And this is really telling. Because their condition is something that can be diagnosed, pathocracies have to attack the very fields that could do the diagnosing. Fields like psychology and psychiatry become public enemy number one. Why? Because those sciences are an existential threat. They hold the power to pull back the curtain and show the rulers for what they really are. So objective truth itself has to be destroyed.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty bleak diagnosis. So the big question is there a cure? If Ponerology is the diagnosis, what's the prescription? What's interesting is that the solution he proposes isn't another political ideology. You can't fight this disease with more politics. Instead, he prescribes a kind of societal therapy. It's all about knowledge. We need to really understand history, learn to recognize these pathological traits in people and in systems, and sharpen our own critical thinking skills so we don't fall for hysteria. It's about consciously rebuilding our shared human values, basically building a stronger societal immune system. And I think this quote really gets at the delicate balance needed here. We absolutely have to learn from the past, but we can't get so fixated on old wounds and grievances that we lose sight of the present. Because that fixation, that just feeds the next round of hysteria. It's about using the past to see the future more clearly. So, in the end, Lobaczewski's work gives us this incredibly powerful, if unsettling, diagnostic tool. He's laid out the nature of the disease, how it starts, and what the symptoms look like. The diagnosis is on the table. The only question left for us is, are we paying attention to the symptoms?